The CEO secretly followed his assistant. The truth changed his life forever. Claire, wait! The deep voice of Ethan Caldwell, the tech magnate known for his icy demeanor, echoed across the sleek marble lobby. Claire Ramirez froze, her hand tightening around her worn leather bag as the sliding glass doors hissed open behind her. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell?" she asked, turning slightly, her dark hair catching the glow of the chandelier. "Did I forget something?" Ethan's piercing gray eyes narrowed, scanning her face for any flicker of guilt. "That bag, what's in it?" Claire hugged the strap closer to her shoulder. "Just groceries I picked up on my way out." "Is there a problem?" "You've been leaving earlier than usual these past few weeks," he said, stepping closer. "Family emergencies, you told me." "My younger brother is sick. I've explained this, sir." "And yet," Ethan's voice softened, though the suspicion in his tone lingered. "Yesterday, I overheard you on the phone asking someone if the funds would be enough. Care to explain?" Claire's cheeks flushed as her posture stiffened. "I don't see how that's your concern." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the automatic doors and distant city traffic filling the space. "If you don't trust me, Mr. Caldwell," Claire said firmly, her chin lifting, "perhaps you should find another assistant." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and strode out into the crisp evening air, her boots clicking sharply against the concrete. Ethan watched her disappear into the dark Seattle streets, his jaw tight. Back in his penthouse office overlooking the city skyline, Ethan poured a glass of whiskey and stared at the golden lights below. His world was calculated, controlled, built that way after years of betrayals. Claire had worked for him for 7 months. Quiet, efficient, diligent. Yet now there were cracks in her perfect record. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Victor, any progress on the background check?" "Clean," came the voice of his private investigator. "But sir, you're doing it again. You're chasing shadows." "Maybe," Ethan murmured, scrolling through Claire's file on his laptop. But he'd been fooled before. He wouldn't let it happen again. Tonight, he'd find out where Claire really went after work. The night air was colder than usual as Ethan pulled his black Jaguar into the shadows across from the 5th Avenue bus stop. Claire's small figure stood beneath a flickering streetlight, her leather bag clutched tightly to her side. For months, she'd followed the same routine. Leave his office at precisely 5:30 p.m., board the number 22 bus, and disappear into the city's sprawl. He'd even followed her once or twice before, just to ensure she went home. But tonight felt different. Tonight, he couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion in his chest. Claire glanced over her shoulder as if sensing something, but Ethan ducked low behind the wheel. "You're being paranoid," he told himself. Again. The bus arrived, and Claire climbed aboard, her coat pulled tight around her slim frame. Ethan waited until the bus turned the corner, then slid his car into traffic, keeping 2 vehicles between them. "Just groceries," he muttered to himself. "Then why the secrecy? Why the money transfer last week?" The city lights blurred past as Ethan followed the bus to an older part of town he rarely visited. Buildings here were lined with graffiti, windows barred with rusting metal. Finally, the bus stopped in front of a dimly lit brick building with peeling paint and a faded sign. Hope Haven Community Center. Claire stepped off the bus and walked briskly toward the entrance. Ethan parked a block away and followed on foot, his polished shoes crunching softly on the cracked pavement. Through the smudged glass doors, he could see her. Claire set down her bag and greeted an elderly woman with a warm embrace. Then, with surprising energy, she moved to the front of a room filled with people, men and women of all ages, clutching notebooks and pens. "Good evening, everyone," Claire's voice carried faintly through the cracked window. "Tonight, we'll practice introducing ourselves in English." Ethan froze. He'd expected anything but this. For the next hour, he watched Claire guide her students with patience and laughter. When an older man stumbled over a phrase, she knelt beside him, repeating the words softly until he smiled. When a young mother grew frustrated, Claire touched her arm gently and reassured her in Spanish. Later, she unpacked her groceries, not for herself, but to prepare sandwiches and fruit for her students. They ate together, chatting in a mix of broken English and Spanish, their faces glowing with gratitude. Ethan stepped back into the shadows, his heart pounding. The narrative he'd built in his head, embezzlement, betrayal, hidden agendas, crumbled like dust. This wasn't deception, it was sacrifice. Ethan sat frozen in his car, staring at the dimly lit community center. The glow of warm yellow light spilled out of its cracked windows, illuminating Claire as she laughed with her students. This wasn't the narrative he had prepared himself for. There were no signs of betrayal, no hidden schemes. Instead, there was only her quiet dedication to a group of strangers in need. Bakhiyatsi. Why didn't she tell me? He wondered, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. Inside, Claire handed out sandwiches and bottles of water. She moved with ease, her voice calm yet vibrant. It was a side of her Ethan had never seen in the office. She was alive here, her eyes glowing with purpose. Pulling out his phone, Ethan scrolled through Claire's file again. Graduated top of her class. Fluent in Spanish. Clean background check. Family and financial distress. Younger brother with medical bills. The pieces came together now, but not in the way he expected. Claire wasn't sneaking around to enrich herself. She was pouring every ounce of her time and resources into lifting others. For years, Ethan had built walls around himself. Wealth had taught him that kindness was often a facade for greed, but here was Claire, proving him wrong in the most unexpected way. His phone buzzed. Victor again. "Sir? Are you still out?" "Yes." Ethan's voice was low. "Did you find anything?" Ethan hesitated, staring through the window at Claire as she helped an elderly man with his pronunciation. "Yes," he said finally. "I found out I'm a damn fool." After the class ended, Claire waved goodbye to her students and stepped outside. Ethan ducked in his seat, watching her adjust her scarf against the cool night air. She didn't take the bus this time. Instead, she walked down the cracked sidewalk, her breath curling in the air like smoke. Ethan wanted to call out to her, to apologize, to offer her a ride home, but he stayed still, paralyzed by guilt and something else he couldn't name. Back in his penthouse later that night, Ethan sat in the dark, a glass of scotch untouched on the table beside him. For the first time in years, the silence of his apartment felt suffocating. Claire wasn't just his assistant anymore. She had become something much more dangerous. She had become important. The next morning, Ethan couldn't focus. The endless spreadsheets and investor calls blurred together, his mind replaying images of Claire at the community center, the way her eyes lit up as she encouraged her students, the gentle smile she gave the elderly man struggling with English. For the first time in years, his sterile office felt cold, lifeless. At noon, he found himself lingering by the break room just as Claire walked in. She jumped slightly, clearly startled to see him there. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone professional, "would you like me to bring you your usual lunch?" "Actually," Ethan hesitated. "Could you join me for lunch instead? There's something I'd like to discuss." Claire froze, a hint of suspicion crossing her features. I have plans during lunch." "With the community center?" Ethan asked softly. Claire's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I followed you last night." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them grew thick with tension. "Jesus-y." "You what?" Claire's voice trembled, not with fear, but with a quiet anger. "I thought you were hiding something," Ethan admitted. "You've been leaving early, transferring money, taking calls in Spanish. I assumed," his voice cracked slightly, "I assumed the worst." Claire set her bag down slowly, her knuckles white as she gripped the strap. "So instead of asking me, you spied on me?" Ethan took a step forward, his voice low. "I know I was wrong, but Claire, I saw you last night. I saw how much you give to those people, how much you sacrifice. You're not what I thought." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but the hurt in her eyes didn't fade. "Why didn't you just ask me?" she whispered. "Because I don't trust people," Ethan confessed. "Not after years of being used, lied to, betrayed. But you're different, and I didn't realize it until it was too late." Claire picked up her bag, her voice quiet but firm. "You had no right to invade my life like that." "I know," Ethan's voice broke, "but let me make it right." Claire shook her head. "You can't." She turned to leave but paused at the door. Not everything can be fixed with apologies or money. As the door closed behind her, Ethan felt an unfamiliar ache settle in his chest. For the first time in his life, he wanted to fix something not with wealth, but with himself. The next few days passed in a blur for Ethan. He caught glimpses of Claire in the office, always professional, always polite. But something had shifted. Her warmth was gone, replaced with a careful distance. It gnawed at him. Every night, Ethan found himself staring at his ceiling, wondering how he could make things right. Apologies weren't enough, and money, his usual solution, felt hollow. On Friday afternoon, he sat at his mahogany desk, staring at the website for Hope Haven Community Center. Photos of Claire appeared everywhere, teaching English classes, handing out food, organizing clothing drives. In every picture, she seemed alive in a way he had never seen within the sterile walls of his office. The center's financial reports caught his eye. They were struggling, operating month to month with programs on the brink of being cut. Ethan's fingers hovered over his keyboard. A donation. It would be so easy. A large sum could fix everything. But he paused. If I help her like this, will it just be another reason for her to resent me? Still, he couldn't sit by and watch the place that gave her purpose fall apart. That night, Ethan wired $75,000 to the community center under a shell company's name. He made sure there was no way to trace the donation back to him. The following Monday, Ethan was making coffee in the break room when Claire walked in. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice cool and guarded. "Good morning." He hesitated, then asked, "How was your weekend?" Claire blinked in surprise. It was busy. The community center received an anonymous donation. "That's wonderful," Ethan said softly. "What will they do with it?" "We can keep our programs running for months, buy new supplies, even fix the leaking roof." For the first time in days, a spark of joy flickered in her eyes. Ethan found himself smiling despite the ache in his chest. I'm glad to hear that," he said. Claire looked at him curiously, as if sensing there was more behind his words. But she didn't press. As she turned to leave, Ethan called out, "Claire." "Yes, sir?" "You were right," he said quietly. "Not everything can be fixed with money, but sometimes it's a start." Claire's expression softened for the briefest moment before she walked away. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Hope. Over the next week, Ethan found himself orchestrating small coincidences, leaving his office just as Claire was organizing files, making coffee when she was tidying the kitchen. Their conversations grew longer, warmer, though still tinged with caution. One rainy afternoon, Ethan found Claire in the break room, her brow furrowed over a stack of papers. "Working on something important?" he asked gently. Claire looked up, startled. "It's my thesis. I have a meeting with my advisor tomorrow." "What's it about?" "Barriers to social mobility in immigrant communities," she said, her voice soft but steady. "How access to language programs and job training can break cycles of poverty." Ethan leaned against the counter, genuinely intrigued. "That sounds incredible." "It's just research," Claire said, shrugging. "Probably won't change anything." "Don't say that. You're already changing lives at the community center." Claire blinked, surprised by his sincerity. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, like they were standing on the edge of something neither dared to name. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. "Claire," he said as she entered his office, "I'd like to offer you a full-time position. Better salary, health benefits, paid vacation. You'd manage the household, coordinate with staff, and handle parts of my schedule." Claire froze. "That's very generous, but I don't understand." "You're intelligent, responsible, and you care about doing things right," Ethan said. "This would give you security for your family and time to finish your studies without worrying about bills." Claire's eyes softened, but her voice trembled. I'll need time to think about it." "Of course," Ethan replied. "Take all the time you need." But deep down, he feared her answer. A week later, Claire knocked on his office door. "I've decided about the job offer," she said. Ethan looked up, his heart hammering. "And?" "I can't accept." The word struck him like a blow. "Why not?" Claire took a deep breath. "Because it would mean living someone else's dream instead of my own. The community center needs me. My studies matter to me. And..." She hesitated, her voice growing quieter. "And there's another reason." Ethan's chest tightened. "What reason?" Claire met his eyes, her expression conflicted. "Because I've fallen in love with someone impossible. Taking this job would feel like betraying that feeling." Ethan's breath caught. Someone impossible? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire looked away. Yes, someone who inspires me to do more, to be better, but who could never see me the same way. Before Ethan could respond, she turned and hurried out, leaving him alone in the quiet office. For the first time since his parents died, Ethan felt his heart truly break. How are you feeling about the story so far? I'd really love to know what you think. Did it touch your heart or maybe remind you of something from your own life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're at it, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? I'd love to see how far this story travels. The days that followed were torture. Ethan buried himself in work, his office lights glowing late into the night. But no number of emails or board meetings could quiet the echo of Claire's words. I've fallen in love with someone impossible. He told himself it didn't matter, that her world was different from his, that he had no right to feel this way about her. But every time he walked past her empty desk or heard her laughter drifting faintly from the hallway, the ache in his chest deepened. On Friday afternoon, Claire knocked on his door. "Mr. Caldwell," she said quietly, "I need to give you my notice." Ethan looked up, his stomach twisting. "Your notice?" "Yes." 2 weeks. She hesitated. "I've been accepted into a graduate program for social work. I start my practicum in March." "I see." He forced his voice to remain even. "Congratulations. That's quite an achievement." "Thank you," Claire fidgeted with her hands. "I'll make sure everything is in order before I go." "That won't be necessary." Silence hung between them like a heavy curtain. "Claire," Ethan said finally, his voice softer than he intended, "I'm proud of you. What you're doing, it matters." Claire blinked, her composure faltering for just a moment. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Her last day arrived too quickly. Ethan handed her an envelope with her final paycheck and a substantial bonus, enough to cover her brother's medical bills for a year. "This is too much," Claire whispered, staring at the check. "You've been invaluable to me," Ethan said. "Consider it a graduation gift." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep in touch. Let me know how you're doing." "Of course." As she turned to leave, Claire paused in the doorway. "You've been more than an employer, Mr. Caldwell. You've been a friend." Ethan's throat tightened. "Take care of yourself, Claire. You too." And then she was gone. 3 months later, an invitation arrived in the mail. Hope Haven Community Center Annual Gala. Guest of honor, Claire Ramirez. Ethan stared at it for a long time. He told himself he'd just attend to support the cause, to see her success from afar. But as the date drew near, his heart betrayed him with a quiet hope. What if... The night of the gala, Ethan stood in the doorway of the community center, feeling out of place in his tailored navy suit. The room was alive with laughter and conversation. Children ran between tables, and string lights cast a warm glow over the crowd. And then he saw her. Claire stood at the front of the room, radiant in a simple black dress, her hair pinned up, her smile brighter than he had ever seen. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Claire froze. He was here. The air in the community center seemed to thicken as Claire's eyes locked with Ethan's. Whoa, what is he doing here? She thought, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't seen him in 3 months. Not since the day she walked out of his office with her final paycheck and a swirl of emotions she hadn't dared to name. Now here he was, standing in the doorway like a ghost from another life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice pulled Claire back, "please welcome our volunteer of the year, Claire Ramirez." Applause filled the room as Claire stepped onto the stage. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the crystal plaque, but her voice was steady. "This community saved me as much as I've tried to serve it," she began. "When I first came to this city, I felt invisible. Here, I learned that everyone has value. Everyone has something to contribute." Her gaze swept over the crowd and paused on Ethan. "And to the anonymous donor who helped us expand our programs and keep our doors open, whoever you are, you've shown us that kindness can come from the most unexpected places." Ethan's hands clenched in his lap. She still doesn't know. After the ceremony, Claire mingled with guests, her laughter echoing across the room. But every so often, her eyes flicked toward the corner where Ethan stood, unmoving. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, she approached him. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Call me Ethan," he replied, his voice low. "Congratulations, Claire. You deserve this recognition." "Thank you." She hesitated. "But why are you here? This doesn't seem like your kind of event." "It isn't," Ethan admitted. "But this cause seemed worth supporting." Claire studied him for a long moment. "You're not just here for the sinner, are you?" "No." Ethan took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." Claire crossed her arms, bracing herself. "The anonymous donations, the one that saved the center, and the one that covered your brother's treatment, they were from me." Claire's eyes widened. "You?" "Yes." Ethan's voice cracked. "I followed you that night because I didn't trust you. I thought you were stealing from me. Instead, I found you teaching English to people who needed you more than I ever did. It changed me, Claire. You changed me." Claire stepped back, her face pale. "So all this time, you've been watching my life? Manipulating it?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "It wasn't like that. At first, I was ashamed for doubting you. Later, I was afraid you'd refuse my help if you knew it came from me. But it wasn't charity. It was—" He hesitated. "It was love." Claire blinked, stunned. "I know you said you'd fallen in love with someone impossible," Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "And I know I'm probably not that person, but you're the only woman I've ever—" "Stop." Claire's voice was soft but firm. Ethan froze. "You really don't understand, do you?" Claire whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "You are that impossible person." Ethan's heart thudded painfully in his chest. "What?" "You were the only man who listened to my dreams, who made me feel like my work mattered." She gave a shaky laugh. "But I convinced myself it was hopeless, because you were my employer, because you were you." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Claire." She looked up at him, her tears finally spilling over. "I spent months falling in love with someone I thought could never see me as more than just an assistant. And all this time, you were already loving me in the only way you knew how." Ethan reached for her hand. "We're both idiots." Claire laughed through her tears. "Complete idiots." "So what do we do now?" he asked. Claire smiled, her fingers tightening around his. "We stop running, and we start figuring out how to make two worlds into one." For the first time in years, Ethan Caldwell didn't rush home to his cold, quiet penthouse. Instead, he walked beside Claire under the soft glow of the city lights, their hands brushing occasionally as if testing the boundaries of this fragile new connection. Neither spoke for a while. The silence felt heavy but not uncomfortable. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Claire asked finally, her voice barely louder than the hum of passing cars. "I thought it was impossible," Ethan admitted. "That you'd never see me as anything more than your arrogant, paranoid boss." Claire gave a soft laugh. "I thought you'd never see me as more than the woman who organized your calendar and fetched your coffee." Ethan glanced sideways at her. "I saw you long before I knew how to admit it. The way you care for others, it's rare, Claire. It made me realize how empty my life had become." They stopped in front of Claire's modest apartment building. She turned to face him, her eyes shimmering in the dim streetlight. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. "I don't expect an answer tonight," he said gently. "But I need you to know, this isn't about me trying to fix things with money. I don't want to buy your time or your loyalty." "What do you want?" Claire whispered. "Time," Ethan said simply. "Time to show you who I can be when I'm not hiding behind my bank account." Claire's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. "I'd like that." Later that night, Ethan sat in his sprawling penthouse, staring out at the glittering skyline. It felt different now, not like a fortress, but like a cage he was ready to step out of. His phone buzzed, a message from Claire. "Thank you for coming tonight. I didn't realize how much I needed you there." Ethan exhaled, a rare smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in years, the silence in his home didn't feel quite so lonely. 6 months later, the Hope Haven Community Center had never looked more alive. String lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over tables covered in crisp white linens. Children giggled as they weaved between guests, their laughter mingling with the soft music drifting through the hall. Ethan stood near the entrance, his heart pounding as he scanned the room. It still felt strange. This wasn't his world. But tonight, he wasn't the guarded millionaire hiding in his fortress. Tonight, he was here for her. And then he saw Claire. She stood at the center of the room, radiant in an elegant emerald dress, her hair swept up, her eyes sparkling with purpose and joy. She laughed as she spoke with a group of volunteers, completely in her element. Beatty, Ethan felt the air catch in his chest. Beatty, this is her world, he thought. And I want to be part of it. When Claire finally noticed him, she froze. Ethan, she whispered, weaving through the crowd toward him. You look. He hesitated, a rare smile touching his lips. Incredible. Claire's cheeks warmed. You came. I told you I would, Ethan said softly. This place matters to you, so it matters to me. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the gala fading around them. Can I steal you for a moment? Ethan asked. 2. Claire nodded, letting him guide her to a quiet corner. I don't want to waste any more time, Ethan began. Claire, these last few months have taught me more than all my years building companies. You've shown me what real wealth looks like, and it's not money. It's purpose. It's love. Claire's breath caught as Ethan dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Claire Ramirez, will you marry me? Her hands flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. The room erupted into applause as guests realized what had just happened. Ethan stood, sliding the delicate ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. For the first time in years, he felt whole. A year later, the Hope Haven Community Center looked more beautiful than ever. White roses and fairy lights transformed the hall into a wedding venue. Guests filled the seats. Business associates sat beside volunteers. Tech executives chatted with community organizers. At the front of the room, Ethan stood in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his gray eyes soft as they fixed on the aisle. And then he saw her. Claire walked toward him in her grandmother's lace wedding dress, her arm linked with her brother's. She looked ethereal, her smile steady despite the tears glistening in her eyes. When she reached him, Ethan whispered, "You take my breath away." Claire laughed softly, her fingers tightening around his hand. Father Miguel began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to witness the union of two souls who found not just love, but purpose in each other. When it was time for vows, Ethan spoke first. Claire, you taught me that trust isn't weakness, and love isn't a transaction. You opened my eyes to the beauty of a life lived for others. I promise to stand by you, not just in comfort but in purpose, as we work to make this world kinder together. Claire wiped at her tears, her voice steady as she replied, Ethan, you showed me that even the most guarded hearts can learn to love deeply. You proved that two people from different worlds can build a new one together. I promise to walk beside you as your partner in life, in love, and in our shared mission. As they kissed and the room erupted in cheers, Ethan and Claire felt the weight of their old worlds falling away. They weren't just a millionaire and an assistant anymore. They were partners, building a life, a family, and a foundation that would help thousands. And as they swayed to their first dance, Ethan whispered, "Remember when I thought you were stealing from me?" Claire laughed. "And I thought you'd never see me as more than the help? Look at us now." "Changing the world," Claire murmured. "Together." Outside, the city lights of Seattle sparkled like promises. And for the first time, Ethan Caldwell felt like he was exactly where he belonged. If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope. Stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.